The modern world can probably be best summarized at this point in time as a search for meaning. For quite a lot of people, a futile search for meaning. So what I'd like to do in this video, part 3 of this series, is introduce you to Viktor Frankl's idea about what values are, how to actually see these values embodied in your life, and how that actually relates to meaning overall. You might be familiar with Viktor Frankl in terms of his very famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read anything by Viktor Frankl, I would absolutely suggest starting here. This goes through largely his experience from the concentration camps, and then also what he has learned from that experience as a human being and the correct attitude to have towards life. It's an absolutely amazing book, and it's very, very short as well, as you can see. About half of this is his account of the camps, and the other half of it is introducing his idea of logotherapy, and that's going to be the book recommendation for today. I would start here if you haven't already read this, but what I'm going to introduce is this book, The Doctor and the Soul. It's an absolutely incredible work, this one, and it goes into considerable detail if you're interested in the work of Viktor Frankl himself and what he refers to as logotherapy. So the key thing that we need to remember with something like this is that for somebody like Frankl, you can't just be free. You can't just have meaning. That comes with responsibility. These are two halves of the same whole. If you imagine the yin-yang symbol, where we've got, let's say, like the black and white circle where the white is found within the black and the black within the white, in case you're wondering what I'm referring to there. In the same way, we've got to think about it as you've got responsibility as one angle and you've got fulfillment as the other angle, but they are combined within each other. To have responsibility is to have fulfillment, and to have fulfillment is to have responsibility. You can't just find this within yourself. You've got to be directed towards the world. You've got to have the right attitude towards the world. And that's what's particularly important when we break down his example of values. So I'm going to use an example of a hiker to try to explain this, because on a lot of these books that I'm referring to, there's going to be just a discussion of values in general. But Frankl actually goes further and separates this into 3 areas, which are creative values, experiential values, and attitudinal values. So let's take, for example, a hiker that goes out for a hike to see a sunrise at the start of the day. There's the creative there's the creative values in the first place, in terms of he's going to have to value physical fitness. He's going to have to be able to come up with a certain plan to be able to manage this walk itself, and he's just going to be able to put that into practice. So the creative values are what we'd actually understand to be the regular understanding of values. Managing your time, learning how to be able to be physically fit enough, to be able to prioritize nutrition, to be able to get up there in the first place, to be able to prioritize like good sleep. It's all the basics when we talk about the creative approach towards life in terms of what it is that we're doing. When we start to think about the experiential value, that's the idea that when you get to the very top of that mountain and you look over and you see the sunrise coming up above the horizon, the experiential value is the fact that you're the person there who is experiencing this wondrous thing. You can read about it in a book, you could look at pictures of sunrises, but there's something uniquely special about it being you who is up there and you witnessing that at that point in time. But both of those two things are still irrelevant in compared to the third one, which is the attitude that you have towards that hike to begin with, towards life more generally when we think about it. Because if you were to, let's say you went on that hike willingly and voluntarily, you prioritize all this physical fitness and you want to do this, you want to appreciate the beauty. So when you get there, that's great. It all lines up. It's all nice and straightforward. But let's say you invite your friend on the hike the next day to do the same thing, and they very begrudgingly wake up. They complain on the entire way up there. They've got their head down. They're not like taking in the full scenery. They don't really prioritize many of the values that you prioritize. So it's a real effort for them to be able to do this. They get to the top, they see the sunrise, and not only were they unwilling to go up there to begin with, they think, well, is that it? Is that what we've done? We've climbed for 2 hours just to see this. Those two people have done the exact same journey, but it's been experientially an extremely different process for them. One of them has faced that difficulty voluntarily and willingly, and they've become a better person as a result of it. They've cherished the full situation. And the other person has very begrudgingly got there Just because those two people reach the top of the mountain and see literally the same thing, it doesn't mean the same thing to both of them. And that's why attitude is so important, because it could be that it might just be a few years later, some tragedy strikes, and that person is then, let's say they wake up from a coma and they're stuck in a bed. The creative aspect towards life is massively diminished. Their experiences are massively diminished, but that says nothing at all about their attitude towards life. They could still be very willing towards life. They could still say yes to life in spite of everything, to refer to another book of Frankl's. It's this idea that no matter what the external situations are, it's who we are and how we face those conditions, which is of considerably more importance. And this puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people if we don't realize this, because a lot of people think about it as, well, what's the meaning of life? Or another way of saying that is like, what's the best possible answer to that question? But that question itself doesn't really make sense. He uses this wonderful analogy in the book around chess and chess masters. You can't just ask somebody who is playing chess, what's the best move? Just in chess in general, because it doesn't make sense. It's too abstract. The only way to answer a question like that is to take into account where the specific pieces are in that specific context. You can only ask what is the best move when you look at that particular board at that particular time, given that unique setup. Then you can ask, what is the best move to make in this position? And if you're asking yourself at this point in time, what's the meaning of life? What should I do? It's too big a question. That's like the same as asking, what's the best move in chess? You can't really just say, oh, the best move is a checkmate, because in a lot of positions, you can't just checkmate an opponent. It's not possible. So what we need to do instead is to ask, at this point in time in my life, what is the best thing that I can be doing? Or not even the best thing, what is a better thing to be doing that aims towards this desired future of who I want to become? What is it that I can do to put myself in a better situation? And that comes down to meaning. It comes down to responsibility. It comes down to fulfillment once we actually start to manage all of this. But more fundamentally, it rests on our attitude towards life. It's to develop a stance towards life that is decisive, where we can make that decisive commitment and gather the knowledge on the way once we've actually committed to that decision, rather than the way around of unnecessarily planning everything out to an extreme degree and then taking action months or years later. We're trying to reverse that process overall. And it has this absolutely wonderful maxim or rule to live by, which I just want to read out in here because I think it'll make things as clear as possible. And it's a nice way of just keeping this sentence just in your head over and over and over again when you're wondering what to do. And it's this. It's to live as if you were living for a second time and had acted as wrongly the first time as you are about to act now. It's quite a wordy sentence, so let me just read through that again. To live as if you were living for a second time and had acted as wrongly the first time as you are about to act now. When you consider a question like that, think what changes? If whatever it is that you're about to do, you've assumed it's already gone wrong, how would you have improved that situation? And if you can act with that mindset of having already improved that situation to begin with, then that's so much more important, and it puts you in a much better state towards life as well as we start to consider all of this. I'm aware that I don't want this video to go on for too long though, so I want to make this really, really clear. When we talk about the third book in this series, we're trying to have a look at how to find meaning in a structured way, how to break down these idea of values. And that's where the creative, the experiential, and the attitudinal values will start to come in. If you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, I would absolutely suggest that. You could probably read that in a day. It's very, very short. It's under 150 pages overall. But for the sake of this, the official book recommendation is going to be Doctor and the Soul, because that breaks down his thoughts and his thinking in a wonderfully concise way. And he uses lots of amazing analogies as well. I absolutely love The Doctor and the Soul. I love Frankl's work in general. But this will also directly link onto the next book in our series, which is going to be The Primal Wound. I'll explain more about that over there. Just access this if you are interested on the right-hand side in the comments, or just one of the videos that will be popping up just at the bottom of this video. And as soon as you're ready, I'll see you over there.